Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins, and it's wonderful to be joined by Melanie Goodman today. Melanie, you're very welcome to the podcast, and let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself, tell us all about your journey and the world of work that you're involved in. So over to you, Melanie.
Thank you, and thanks for having me today. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Melanie Goodman, and I run Trevisan, which is a LinkedIn marketing and training company, and we are focused mostly on professional services. So those people who are in law or finance. But that said, we actually have a myriad of clients, from an Irish entertainer to someone who runs a dating agency in Switzerland. So people come to me actually from a variety of sectors, but our niche is really sort of people in the finance arena or the legal arena. And that's due to my own background, because I actually started off my career as a property finance lawyer based in London. And that was many moons ago. And as things progressed and I moved countries, I ended up shifting and pivoting my career, as many people do, and I ended up doing business development, and particularly LinkedIn. I made my niche because I just saw the potential and the opportunities, and I created them for myself and the law firm that I was working for, and then realized that actually I could do it for lots and lots of people. So I started my own business. And so now I spend a lot of my time going into companies and training people how to use LinkedIn to generate more business, how to position themselves so they rank higher than their competitors on LinkedIn. And I work on an individual basis with people, as well as actually for some people who don't have either the time or the inclination to use LinkedIn, we manage and grow their accounts on their behalf.
Very good. And I suppose LinkedIn, it's such an important tool in today's world, because it started off as sort of like this place where you kind of put your CV if you're looking for a job, and people were posting jobs. And then it became this whole sort of large scale global platform. And then, of course, Microsoft bought the company. And, it just seems to continue to go from strength to strength. I think there's about 900 million, but you probably know better than I do in terms of people on the platform.
Yeah.
But the question I've got for you, if I can, is when people come to you, I think a lot of people who are in business, whether it's for themselves as a solo entrepreneur or working in an organization, of course they want to grow revenue. Of course they want to make more money. But what are some of the fundamentals that you have to take people through when you're helping them with, for example, their LinkedIn strategy to help them grow leads, to grow connections, to grow revenue?
I really try and encourage people, even if we are doing a lot of the sort of legwork for them, that you can't replace human input of personality. So I always try and encourage people to do those spontaneous posts themselves, because even if you have got someone else creating your content on LinkedIn, I can't be someone else, and I wouldn't want to be, and they wouldn't want to be me. And, your own voice, it's really important that your own voice comes through, and people get to know that person through your posts. And I know that people always say to me, my children even say to me that I'm an over smiler. And I know that loads of people have said to me, oh, you always come on and you're always smiling. And I actually can't help it. I'm not happy all the time, because that'd be quite irritating. But most of the time I am sort of smiling, and my posts are generally positive. I actually don't think that most of my connections want to come on and read about what's gone wrong in my day and what's not great in my life. Really, it's not positive, and I don't think that is the way that I will attract people to my profile. Everyone, of course, has their own style, but what I normally say to people is, try and make time, even if it's once a week, to do a spontaneous post yourself, an experience, a client experience, something that happened to you during the week. We don't have to resort to sort of I went out for dinner and this is a picture of my food type post, but just something that shows a bit more of your human side and not necessarily your company and your brand or your industry. So go a bit beyond your everyday work. So if you're a lawyer, you might not always want every post to talk about a legal trend or a case. You might want to talk about the culture in your law firm, or what you're doing to to attract new graduates, or, what what you're planning as a team event, or a team event that you've had, or, you can sort of think outside a bit, or even what, how you spend your weekends, whether it's planning for the next week, or even, if you like going paragliding or something. But the occasional, if you pepper your general content strategy with these sort of personal posts, but make sure that they account for, say, only 10 or 15% of your posts and not the majority, then people just see you as a more well-rounded person. They get to know you, they feel that they know you better.
Really like that, Melanie, because it's the first time actually somebody has said to me in recent times about a percentage, about 15%. And I know it's, a little bit of margin either side of that, but it is interesting because people who constantly post just business, 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 it can get a bit repetitive, and it doesn't let you into them as a person. And what you're touching on there, I think, is a really important point, that people want to find out more about the person, don't they? It's about, I'm going to use the term personal brand maybe a little bit, but about the two other words that sprang to mind when you were talking were vulnerability and being human. And I think in recent times, and certainly at the time of recording, in this crazy AI world that we're all living in, with all the announcements that are going on, being human, being vulnerable, and developing that sort of more personable side to what you're doing seems to be more important now than ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, ChatGPT, even the fourth version of it, the new model, I mean, it can't replicate emotion. So actually, I was watching another marketing professional yesterday on YouTube, and he was talking about how you can use ChatGPT to try and add some emotion into your posts, or into the post that it generates for you, but it is still limited. I mean, although, as I said, sort of percentage-wise, probably 80% of my posts are about how to on LinkedIn, how to do this, how to use that, new features on LinkedIn, and try and, give people some practical advice. But, for example, the best post that I've had this year is the post that I did on International Women's Day about why I'm not a fan of International Women's Day. And, that post, that post, I think, sort of had about 300 likes. And it really resonated with people. And I think they got to know me a bit better. And they came away from the post knowing something about me as a person that they didn't know before they read it. So those posts, they naturally resonate with your audience if you don't do them sort of every day, because then it just becomes a Facebook feed. And I don't want to go down the is it Facebook route, but there's a whole other discussion.
Very good. Yeah. And I suppose when you're maybe the headline is kind of going against the norm, well, I don't kind of like this and everybody else seems to like it, that of course will get attention. But the other thing that I think you're touching on there is you're adding value to a conversation. You're getting people to think about some perspective that maybe they haven't seen before. And that must be important when it comes to people growing their own profile, growing their LinkedIn success, and not just limited to LinkedIn, on other platforms too, because people tend to show up time and time again when you're sharing value, don't they?
They do. And it's the best way to stay top of mind of people, is to consistently, without spamming them, but consistently give them something new, tell them something they didn't know, something that makes you valuable, so it makes your connection with them on LinkedIn valuable. So the way that I work when I'm growing my own LinkedIn network, and it's what we replicate with clients, is that I will make sure that I stay in contact with my connections. So I know that if I connect with somebody on the 1st of January, I know that 3 months later, I'm going to send them a message to check in with them, see how the business is doing, and I'm not selling. And I might even share with them a document that I might have produced, an ebook, and or tell them something new that's been launched on LinkedIn as a sort of PS to the message, to see, have they heard about it? The one that a lot of my connections didn't know about, even though it's been around quite a few months now, is the bell on people's profiles, so that they see people's posts. And you forget that unless you're a regular LinkedIn user, which most people aren't, because often you just see the people who are on it the whole time, but a lot of your connections won't be on LinkedIn the whole time. They won't know about the new features unless you tell them. So, and it's the same when, if you're a financial advisor, by checking in with your clients and telling them, like, are you aware that the capital gains tax allowance has fallen from, from this to this, and you might want to do something before year end. You're adding value to that conversation with somebody. So it's not just a spammy, shall we have a call because you look like my ideal client. That you want to be remembered for giving something of value.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the LinkedIn bell, and I know there are people listening to this or watching this around the world who immediately will pull up their LinkedIn profile and look for the bell because they haven't seen it yet. And it's kind of something that YouTube's been using for a while, where if you don't click the bell on YouTube, the chances are the algorithm may not serve that new content to you. You may miss it. You may not get it. And like that, if you're particularly in your business, of course, you're providing that value and that almost that pulse of what's happening and what's going on and what's new. And I think that's really, really important. The other question I've got for you, though, if I can, Melanie, is obviously from a financial and possibly a legal background, I understand some of your clients will fit nicely into that category. But do you find that you work more and more with individuals who are looking to grow their own persona, or is it more sort of businesses that are looking to scale? What's kind of the split of that for your organization? I'm just interested in that because in today's world, we're seeing lots and lots of people, whether it's having that sort of side project or building their own personality in another area, which sometimes can be completely outside of what they do for their main sort of role or position.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because there has definitely, and I found that actually probably in the last 2 years. So my client base has grown a lot with coaches and consultants, so individual coaches and consultants, a lot of sort of leadership coaches and business coaches in various areas. So, they could be, so anything from sort of motivation. So, going into teams, to basically motivate teams within companies, these people, or they could, they are very niched. I have one client who's a menopause coach. So she goes into companies and teaches them how to support their staff on menopause. So yeah, I've seen a great deal of coaches who want to, sometimes they also have a job full-time in another company as well. But we have also done some personal branding for people who are within big multinationals, and they basically want to I wouldn't say feather their own nest, but further their own personal brand, so they are known in the sector rather than just being VP at XYZ bank, or at a bit massive pharmaceutical company. They want to become like that, known as a thought leader and an expert in their area. So we will create them their own sort of branding, so their own logo with an initial on it. And most companies are actually, even the multinationals are usually happy for their staff to be posting their own stuff on LinkedIn. A recent client that I had who was within a big multinational, he agreed that he would share their posts as well as doing his own post, but they were fine. We had his own hashtag, so a custom hashtag for him that we started, and then would post regularly with his own branding as well. So, it had dual purpose because for the large company, it's employee advocacy. So, the more people that are looking at him, actually, the more people are looking at them as well. So it works both ways. So I do see a lot of people wanting to push their own personal brand as well. Lots of individuals, sort of solopreneurs and investors. So our client base is pretty diverse. And actually I've just created something new, which is launching in March, which is focused on people who don't have their own marketing teams. So a whole new portal called the Link Tank, which we've just actually received our trademark registration, and that is going to be purely for sort of coaches, consultants, and small business owners.
The Link Tank, it's so simple but brilliant.
Well, I hope so. I hope other people think that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I've
that
had
a
a few
lot.
people like the name actually. A few people have
It's
said to me,
very good. Why have I not heard that before? That's fantastic. Yeah.
that's it.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask as well, because I do want to move on, I want to change gear in a moment or two. But before we move off this topic, you've obviously been, from city lawyer to running this company now, but you were pre-pandemic, you were running this company too. And I'm
Yes.
just interested in, were you one of those companies that thrive throughout the pandemic because everybody wanted to move online? Did you struggle throughout the pandemic? Was it actually good for business or not? And did you find that that changed your business at all?
Do you know, I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing, but there was no huge upturn and no huge downturn. So literally my business just kept on turning throughout the pandemic. So I was very grateful, very lucky that nothing really changed. The only thing that changed slightly was, whereas I might have done an in-person LinkedIn training, everything went to Zoom. But funnily enough, I've actually kept to that format. Unless somebody really wants me to go into their company and train a group in person, I actually find that LinkedIn training works almost better over Zoom because you can share screens. So you can have umpteen people and they can, you take it in terms of, they can share their screen and show everyone else, and then we can adapt their LinkedIn profile as we go, and someone else, so everyone can work at once. And actually that works better over Zoom. So LinkedIn training is great over Zoom. And I think what I have seen is that I think more companies are now more focused on training their teams to become better on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn took a greater precedence during COVID, that people have realized the value in it. Whereas before it was just a social media platform, but everyone then used it actually to start networking with people because they couldn't network in real life. And then it was like, okay, actually this is quite useful. In fact, this works, and actually we can get clients, in this way. It's a whole new channel we haven't really considered properly before. So from that point of view, so I'd be lying if I said that my business, suddenly went mental. But by the same rationale, I actually didn't lose any clients due to COVID either. So it's just seen more on the LinkedIn coaching side that increased. But
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us that feedback, Manny, because it's interesting. Obviously, I talk to lots of different industry sectors, lots of different people around many, many parts of the world. And obviously some sectors really struggled, some sectors really thrived, some people had terrible tragedy and loss, other people absolutely skyrocketed through the pandemic. So it is interesting to get that feedback from you. And one thing that you said really resonated with me, that today you sort of carry on the practice that doing some things online is actually more productive, it's actually better. And maybe without the pandemic, we may not have had that. And I've had that conversation with people who, used to fly around to conferences, or salespeople who are constantly traveling to customers, etc. Now they think a lot more about, what am I going to do in person versus what can I do in a more maybe time cost effective type environment, that ultimately, as you're pointing out, particularly in your area of expertise, sometimes it's better for the end user. It's a better experience.
yeah, exactly. I mean, people sometimes, just because they haven't actually had the options put in front of them, they'll be like, no, we want you to come in and we want you to, to give a talk to 25 people. And actually I was asked just a couple of weeks ago to give a talk at an event. And I said, and there's some other speakers there as well. There's going to be some other speakers. And I said, do you know what? Why don't you let the other speakers do their parts? That's fine. But what I think would work better is, during the networking part of the event, why don't I be set up in an area and people can come to me as like a drop-in, look at their own LinkedIn profile, ask their own questions, and gain the sort of nuggets and the LinkedIn training on a one-to-one, where they can actually show me, rather than me just give a general talk, which then people are just going to walk away from and probably, not remember half an hour later exactly what I said you were supposed to be doing. Whereas actually, if I sit with someone for 5 minutes, so a bit like speed dating for LinkedIn, let's, sit for 5 minutes, I'll give you, some, improve this, you'll rank higher in searches. And or like, what are you struggling with? I'll help you. What's the best way to post? this is how to do it. And they were like, okay, we haven't thought about doing it like that. So it's sometimes, just sort of repositioning someone's thinking because the idea hasn't been presented to them.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, look, I want to change gear a little bit now, and I want to ask you a few questions because we'd like to share a little bit more insight about the guests that we have here on the Global Discussion. And the first thing is really about your own learning style, the way that you sort of onboard information. And that information can be to relax, for pleasure, for business. It can be, deep study. It can just be something to help you unwind. But when I ask you that question, do books spring to mind, movies, Netflix? Do you learn most of all by just mixing with people or having Zoom calls? How does it work for you? Have you got any books you can share with us? And what's your learning style?
Okay, so my learning style is very much, if there's something I don't know, I'll go and research. I'm very much a research person. So definitely not Netflix and TV. I hardly watch any TV. In fact, I usually have to phone my husband when he's away if I do want to watch some TV because I don't know how to work it because we've got like 3 different controls. So TV is definitely not my thing. I'm very much a research person. So I like reading sort of longer form content. The one book, so the reason I don't actually read a lot of business books, and I can tell you I have a whole pile of them next to my bed, is purely due to time constraints. So there's about 3 that I want to read, but there's one which I have read, which I would really recommend. And it's actually by another LinkedIn expert called John Espirian. And it's called Content DNA, because I'm very much somebody who focuses on practical advice. I like practical takeaways, maybe because I don't have a originally marketing background, that sort of, a lot of jargon and sort of fluff is not my thing. So I want to read something and think, okay, I'm going to do that tomorrow and see what happens. And so, it's all about sort of testing and split testing and etc., and which is a bit jargony, but it is all about testing what works for your audience. But actually in Content DNA, John gives some really good advice about branding, about, how to write posts. And it's a great book to read, especially maybe if you're at the beginning of your LinkedIn journey. So, and I mean, the other books I read, I'm very much I prefer to read for pleasure. So the books that I read are not sort of generally that inspiring, because I'm a real fiction person. But I can recommend a very good fiction book called The Nightingale if you haven't read it, by Kristen Hanna, and it's very, very good.
Very good. Well, there's 2 great recommendations. I know John puts out a lot of good content too, as do you, very much in the LinkedIn field. But The Nightingale as well, if people want to check that out, there's another recommendation, hot off the press.
It's not, I just warn you, it's not a happy clappy book. It's actually set in the Holocaust. So it's maybe not holiday reading, but it's a great book.
There you go. There's the warning. Comes with a warning label.
Yeah, it comes with a caveat there.
The other question I want to ask is about your journey, about people that maybe have helped you along the way, or people that you admire or that have inspired you.
Okay, so people that are inspiring, I am going to choose a couple of people from my own LinkedIn network, actually, because I worked recently with a lady called Fiona Callanan, and she is general counsel at McKinsey. She just moved actually from Hong Kong to London, and she's a TEDx speaker, and she lost a limb in the tsunami, and her journey and her resilience and authenticity and her own career path is actually really inspiring. So I work with her on optimizing her LinkedIn profile, but through that, I learned about her and her journey. And so I recommend to look out for her on LinkedIn if you want to learn a bit more about her, or if you're in need of a general counsel. She is a very, very well qualified, highly intelligent lady, and has an inspiring story to tell. So actually you can check out her TED Talk on YouTube. And the second person I'm going to mention is she's just a LinkedIn connection, and I haven't met her in real life. Her name is Hannah Morris, and she posts every single day she homeschools her 3 children. And she posts, so it's nothing to do with law or finance or anything that I would normally follow. And I can't recall exactly how I came across her profile to start with. And I think we were through mutual connections. But she posts every day about her journey homeschooling her 3 children. Now, because I actually lived in Switzerland for 16 years, we didn't really suffer much they didn't really lock down for very long, about 8 weeks. So I can't honestly say that I did a lot of homeschooling myself, and my children are sort of older, 2 out of 3. So, but I read about how she manages her children and how she educates them and she's not a qualified teacher. That's not her profession, to the level that she does. And I find that really inspiring, because I know that I would not have that amount of patience, or, you know, her planning and her results are really admirable. So a shout out for Hannah Morris.
That's great. Two great people there. And of course, they're from your LinkedIn network. So that's brilliant. The next question is about advice. You know, there must be advice that you've picked up along the way, or maybe there's advice that you find yourself sharing with others. When I ask you about advice, what springs to mind?
The one thing that springs to mind is to build a network before you need it. That would be my key piece of advice to people. And it's not actually through someone sort of telling me that. I can't think of someone who actually said that to me, but it's through my own journey that I found that key. I was actually made redundant back in 2015 from a law firm after the Panama Papers, because they were a Panamanian law firm, and so that sort of led me actually to start my own business. And the reason that I had a springboard when I started was because I had spent the time not actually knowing that I was going to be made redundant, but I had spent the last few years before building my own network on LinkedIn, but with people who were valuable connections, not just with anybody. So they were within my sort of the sectors that I wanted to work in. And of course, when I started my own business, I actually managed to start from day one with 4 clients, because they knew my capabilities, they had got to know me a bit, and from there it sort of blossomed from there. But had I not built that network before I needed it, I would have been starting from scratch. So often people say to me, you know, oh, well, we're not actually going to, you know, we're not looking to ramp up our marketing and really do anything, you know, to be visible for the next 6 months. And I say to people, that's fine, but what you actually want to do is you want to actually build your network before you need to go to them with the message that says, can we talk, or are you interested in? You want them to already have established a relationship with you. So I would say to people that, you know, if you're thinking of launching a fund, or you're thinking of launching a business, or, you know, maybe make that investment first in building your network before you actually need to ask for something from people.
Great advice. Great advice. As you look forward, Melanie, over the next 6, 9, 12 months, what are you hoping to achieve? How does planning work for you in your business?
So for me, I mean, it's like a lot of businesses, it's about bringing on new clients, going into, well, for me, I always find it interesting when I gain clients from new sectors. I'm just starting work with somebody in the construction sector, with a company in the construction sector. But actually, my main focus for in the next few months is that I'm launching a platform, as I said earlier, the Link Tank, which is so that people can go into it and they can just download templates, business development templates, things to help them when you've got a small business and you haven't got infrastructure behind you, you haven't got assistants, you haven't got marketing people, and you're doing everything yourself, and I know this from when I started my own business, you know, having things that, you know, that are sort of already done for you. So like pro formas, like templates that say, okay, if I'm having a webinar, they've already got the emails sort of pre-written, and then you just have to edit them so as, an email sequence, or, how to onboard a new client, and you have a template for, for the onboarding procedure, and standard operating procedures, and blog articles, some ideas and content prompts. And so basically a lot of done for you material. So that's my focus for the next few months, is to grow that platform, see what people need, what they enjoy downloading, what they find useful, and just providing more of the sort of done for you content.
That sounds like a busy and exciting time. One of the other things I wanted to just squeeze in is you're the author of something called the Encyclopedia of LinkedIn Hashtags. What is that? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So every year I update it. And that is basically it starts off with a guide, because a lot of people don't know how to use hashtags on LinkedIn. So how to use the hashtags in the best possible way. And then it goes on and it lists all the top hashtags for a whole range of industries, everything from recruitment to marketing to tech to fintech, finances, law, real estate. So we've researched all the top hashtags, and it has the hyperlink on it, so that from the actual encyclopedia, you can click on it, you can click on the hashtag and see in real time how many followers that hashtag has got, because obviously it's ever moving, the number of followers of a hashtag. And some always stay at the top. I mean, you've always got sort of ones like India, which always has the most followers, technology, future work, all these sort of ones that always have millions of followers. But it's about how to use them in the best possible way. And yeah, the guide, people tell me that they use it when they create their LinkedIn posts to see, what's going to resonate best. And I always say to people that it's good to have a mixture. So 3 to 5 hashtags per post is optimal, and maybe choose one niche one which has got a lot of followers, and maybe your own custom one as well.
Very good. Thank you, Melanie. And look, as we come in towards the end of our time together today, I just want to ask you 2 quick questions, if I can. The first one is there any other area that you'd like to touch on that maybe I haven't raised today during our time? And secondly, and importantly, if people want to connect with you, I'm assuming LinkedIn's a good place, but I'm sure you have a website. I think you have a Link Tank newsletter. What's the best place to send people to find out all about these wonderful areas that you're involved in?
Okay, so yes, we have a website, which is www.trevisansocial.com, but probably the best place to connect with me, because I spend 90% of my day there, so you'll get the quickest reply, is on LinkedIn. So I love to connect with new people, so do please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with you. If you've listened to this, I'd like to know. So I'm always interested to know actually how people find me, and where they've come from, whether it's Google or whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's, so do introduce yourself, and I'd love to connect.
Well, that brings us nicely to the end of this episode. So thank you very much indeed to everybody who's been watching this episode of the Global Discussion. People who have been watching and listening around the world, we certainly do appreciate it. And I would ask you to help us with the podcast by liking and subscribing and following and doing all the things that we need to do. Also to thank Melanie for being with us today. And I hope that you'll join me back again for some more discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. So thank you, Melanie. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you today.
Thank you for having me.